Okay, so let's finish it up. Um, right, so I believe I mentioned earlier that we're going to be using this splatter is actually as a mask. Uh, so we're going to bring down a blend mode. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to have one texture for the liquid magma and then another one for the dark areas. So we can go ahead and plug this into here. And what I used for it was Gaussian spots 1. And I want this kind of low res, so I'm actually going to bring it down to 128 by 128. And then I'm also going to want it bigger. So I get a transform 2D. And let's bring this up to 300% on either end. And we can apply width, apply height. And so we end up with a bunch of bigger spots. And then we can take this transform 2D and we can rotate them. And then we can take these two guys and then blend them with a light node, so it's going to get denser, but the spots are going to be bigger. There. So what we're going to do with these guys, it's got a disorder on here, so that's good. And I'm just going to, for now, we can always adjust that later. I'm just going to stick a timer on there. So, well, let's take a look at what it's going to do before we do that. So this is just going to run along a timer and it's going to do this. So that's now got a bit of an animation to it. And then we're going to use this base to do actually, well, it's going to work for both of those two textures that we talked about. So what we want to do with this one, actually, let's do this one first. We're going to get another blend node. And right now what we're dealing with is the dark areas. We want these cracks to be sort of undulated by this mask. So we have, and now remember it's moving around. So we have this pretty much static, these static cracks, which are going to appear bigger because they're not being manipulated by this splatter. So they're going to kind of stay there, but they're going to fade in and out according to what's happening with these Gaussian spots. And so that's pretty much done. Now we're using this as a mask, so the light areas here are going to be our liquid magma, which means that's going to go on top, which means this one's going to go in the middle. And then we're going to use this exact same thing for our liquid magma. Except we don't really want it running in exactly the same direction here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing, and again, I'm going to just rotate it. So it doesn't really matter which directions, just so it's different. And then let's put a levels in here and get this pretty close to the same tonality. And we can lighten that up down there. So, we don't want too much sort of contrast on this. This is kind of that roiling liquid magma. And that's going to go on top. So now we have a mask where we have the liquid magma. I think we're going to bring this up to 512 up here. And then bring this back down to 0. No, plug that in there. And that's, I don't know if I like those edges that way before. And that we did over in this levels here, because that one determines the sharpness of those edges. So, Right. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. Okay. Is that moving at all? Yeah, it's moving. I think we're gonna have to work on our gradient map a little bit, but we've got that magma doing its thing. So it's just a question of getting the levels and our grays and our gradient map to match. And then in here, I'm also seeing a fading in and out with that big map. So I think for the basics of it are done, and now it's just a question of working out. Let's step it up one more here. Actually, let's step it up. Makes no difference. Yeah, we're gonna have to. See, well, yeah, let's try this. See, it's gonna start making the material heavier, so I don't know where. See, that almost seems too sharp to me. Yeah, because I mean, the further back you go, I mean, because what you're doing is you're taking stuff that's from a lower resolution and you're kind of slapping a higher resolution on it, and some nodes are sort of take more processing. And since again, this is a matter of personal taste, I want it a bit mushier, so I'm gonna leave it like that. Because that was starting to look a little bit too crisp for me. And since, it's gonna, yeah. And remember, we don't have a height map on here yet either. It's gonna look a lot better once we do that. Okay, so for now, I think we're gonna leave that, and let's put that height map on here. Now the height map is basically the same idea. We're using this same map. And what we're gonna do is we're just going to put that as the mask. We're basically doing, well, the question is, do we want these cracks to appear? Yeah, I do. So we're going to use this one then. And then the only thing I'm really going to change is I'm going to put another levels in here. And we're just going to darken this up a little bit. Oh, you know what we wanted to do? Hold on a second. We got this exact. We want to put an invert grayscale in here. Yeah, I'm messing this up. Hold on a second. Oh, let me start from the beginning. Hold on a second. Now I've gotten myself all confused. This is our lava, which corresponds to these spots here. I did have it right the first time. And then I'm going to, no, I want my lava to be dark because I'm doing my height. So, oh no, that is right, because I am now, that's why I'm confusing myself. Here we go. I'm sorry. I just got back from a very long trip and my brain isn't working properly. Here we go. That's what I wanted to do all along. Okay. And let's plug that into our height. Here we go. So we've got some heights in here. I don't know that I'm entirely happy with those edges. And I think that's probably got a lot to do with our gradient. So let's take a quick look. I don't want to obsess too much on it because, again, this is something that, you know, becomes a very personal thing because you're doing your own colors. Let's see if we can't get this a little bit better. And then maybe, sorry, my microphone is wrong. Maybe get a bit more variation in here. So I'm going to click on here. I'm going to grab this guy. And I'm going to maybe do that. See, but then I end up with this kind of weird little ring. So, I don't know. You know, I literally will spend hours doing this. And I don't necessarily want to bore people with it because what I want is not necessarily what you want. But I do want to illustrate the concept. So what you end up doing when you get to this stage of it is you're touching and feeling you see what I'm not liking is this edge here. And I think now instead of going to the gradient, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go like this. So, you know, it really becomes a question of just messing around with it until you get to a point where you're happy. So let's publish this out one more time. And then I think we're going to move on to the next step because we can kind of go crazy doing this. So that lava's doing its thing. It's showing up underneath there, and it's kind of giving it a, you know, some movement. And then the one last thing I want to look at is this splatter node here. And we can do a lot with this. Now, oh, I think I already did put a disorder on here. I want to see more. I really didn't notice anything at all. So let's put an operator in here, multiplication, and I'm just going to put a constant. And I don't know, let's multiply it by 2. I honestly didn't even see any movement. So let's set this as the output node, and then let's republish it out. Yeah, so that's starting to look like it's, you know, that crust is moving around a little bit. Now, you know, this is starting to look, I mean, obviously with these gradients, it's really hard to get it to look like exactly like the one I did earlier, but all the elements are here. And at this point, what I would probably do is obsess over the, let me try it at 1024. I want to see if I like it at 1024. You just, I mean, this is the point at which I would literally spend an hour just doing the between the gradient and the levels on the other thing. No, I don't see a difference. You know, it doesn't really bother me that much, the fuzziness of it. I kind of like it. What I don't like still is, I think what we will fix together is this right here. I think this is a little too even. First of all, I want to see the height a little bit more undulating. That should do that. And maybe also in the color area we could have a little bit more undulation. So, you know, that's really what it becomes. I mean, you just start messing around with this stuff until you tweak it just right. And, oh, helps if you publish it. And, you know, at this point, it's a matter of personal taste. But yeah, you see, so by creating a bit more contrast in the in this gray scale map here, because this is the one that's dealing with that lava color, I'm actually getting more variation, and then I can go back into the gradient and mess around with that some more, because I know that it corresponds to this stuff up here. So you can, honestly, you can spend hours doing this stuff. So I think we're going to leave it here. And you can customize your lava the way you want it. But just remember that, you know, in addition to just, you know, I just had the edges move, but you can do a lot of stuff with this splatter node. You could, for example, put a timer on pan X, pan Y. You know, it's a tiled texture, and you can just have it pan across, and you can also expose these things. So, you know, just to quickly review, you create an input parameter, and you could call it pan X, and then you can go ahead and get into your splatter mode, and you're going to have to create a formula. So you can go in there and you can say create an empty function, and then you click to edit that empty function, and you can put in whatever function you want to have that particular thing exposed and doing whatever you want it to do. So there's a tremendous amount of variety in what you can do with any of your materials, but just remember that every time you put in some sort of variable or a slider, it has to do that extra calculation. So we always try to lighten the load by placing it as close to the end result as possible. And that's about it. So I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'll think of something, and I guess I'll do another video as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.